And now we are live. Lewis, are you ready to do this?
Yes, sir.
you, s- you, s- you, s- you sound very confident. You're like, ah. Um, yeah, we're just a moment in here. We hit the button on Let's Go Live. This is a broadcast webinar. We're doing things a little differently. It's 5 p.m. Eastern. If you haven't dropped by these, we do these live webinars with just industry experts. In this case, with Lewis Pope, who is head security nerd at Enable. Um, and yeah, I'm Stetson from This is an IT Support Group and IT MSP Entrepreneurs. And today we're talking about password security, rather password hygiene. It's going to be really informal. It's going to be a lot of fun. Lewis and I are just doing this off the cuff. So if you're here, go ahead, drop a comment in the chat if you're on YouTube or on the Facebook groups. Would love to hear from all of you amazing people and users, not users, IT people. I haven't had
Well,
enough caffeine today.
they're still end users of something.
They're end users of something, yeah, but that's a dirty word. Um, well, cool, Lewis. I know we're talking about password hygiene today, but what do you want to kick us off? What does that mean? What are we going to talk
Oh,
about?
sure. So, and this is one of those things that kind of gets talked about in passing, the same way that cybersecurity hygiene kind of gets talked about in passing sometimes. It's for us that are on the technical side of things that are, on the implementation, the response, the day-to-day things. We don't we're not necessarily concerned with the good practices of the end users. That's what the cybersecurity awareness training that's been outsourced or is being handled by somebody else usually. So today it's going to be about, well, let's talk about what that hygiene actually is, how is why it's applicable, why you should be concerned with it, um, why whenever you go and look at best practices, you may not be um, as well served if you follow those best practices first versus taking it a little bit further. Because I'll be pointing out a few things today where a best practice may not really be the best practice, especially since the audience here is very technical. Whenever you go out and you see those password hygiene training, it's usually meant for end users. It is meant for the standard rank and file end users that have normal access to non-privileged accounts. Whereas with most of the people that are going to be here today, we have access to a lot of privileged accounts. We hold the keys to the kingdom. We have to go above and beyond what might be listed in some of those trainings and best practices. And I'll be highlighting some of that today.
Yeah, and Lewis,
And
I'm excited because you said we were going to break best practices today. I don't know about you guys at home,
right,
but I got the keyboard, and what I do is just on the back. Like nobody's ever going to find that. It's a secret post-it note just for me and the computer. Nobody knows.
exactly. It's one of those you have performed your risk evaluation. What is the risk that somebody can compromise that password by discovering it? Well, they're not going to find it on the bottom of your keyboard in your house. So that is a
Yeah,
really secure way for you. Now,
I was just
that
trolling, but you made a good point. What's the odds like
but
somebody's going to ninja into my window and you
right,
know?
but now you're out and about somewhere else, you no longer have access to that handy dandy password underneath your keyboard. But then there's like, well, do you share your house with somebody else? That elevates the risk profile. And then you have to ask, well, do I trust my roommates? And then if you don't
Precisely.
trust your room, then no, I can't do that. And that's the difference between doing the risk evaluation and deciding what you should do based on what actually is at play in your environment versus just going to the best practices baseline out of NIST or ISO or PCI and just following it. Because there's always that opportunity for you to put on your thinking cap, look at it, and say, "I can do. Can I do better?"
Yeah, for sure. And I was just kind of trolling, but you completely had an awesome response to that, Lewis. But I'm kind of thinking, what's our
Yeah.
best way to kick this thing off? Should we start talking about, before we hit live on this thing? You said we were going to break some best practices today. Maybe that's a good area to start exploring. All right, Lewis, I think I lost you, or maybe I got lost. Let's see. Lewis, are you back? Yeah, I think it's on Lewis's end. I was worried. Let's see. Technical difficulties. That's okay. We'll roll with it. Okay, cool. I have word. It is on Lewis's end, so that's all right. We'll give Lewis a moment, but I will encourage you, if you're viewing live right now, go ahead, drop a comment on YouTube or in the Facebook groups. Tell us, just maybe say where you're from, or what you want to hear about password hygiene. We'd love to talk about it a little bit. I think it is Lewis. Lewis has gone robotic. Oh no, that's all right. A we'll send him a ping there. No worries. Cool. So we'll give it just a moment here. I'll be monitoring the chat. If you want to drop by, we do these monthly with Enable, but I think we should do more live events. Maybe that'd be a good point of discussion. I know in the past we've actually done resume roasts. So if you're not familiar with that, we have folks send in their resumes devoid of personal info. So they like black out their name, address, phone number, things like that. And we just give like candid advice on, what resumes look like, or should look like. So that's a lot of fun. I see Layla's dropping by, says, "Hey, it's Layla Rocket." Facebook user says 14 plus character, no complexity, over 8 character complexity required, in my opinion. It's a good point. And I think we have Lewis back. Lewis,
I'm back.
Lewis, do we have you? He's back. No worries.
And of course, yeah, it's buffering a little bit. How am I coming through on your side?
You sound beautiful. And what's a tech demo without things breaking a little bit? That's all right.
All
Cool.
right,
Let's
hold on. Let
if
me
you
let
can hear
me
us, let's
hop.
keep rocking. So what he said,
All
Lewis has
right. So I heard
returned
a
from the depths
question
of the
coming
internet.
in while I was away.
Yeah, we had a few. I don't know who this person is, but they say 14 plus character, no complexity, over 8 plus character complexity required IMO.
Yes, yes,
Rate
yes. So,
my
and that's one
password.
of those things. Yeah, and this is one of those things where you've got different best practices, because if you go look at PCI DSS, it's 7 characters minimum. But if you go look at NIST 853, it's 8 characters minimum. If you go look at NIST 863B, it's the minimum based on the requirements of the environment.
Lewis,
So
can we slow
there's,
down for a moment?
oh
I'm
yeah,
not big brain enough for this, and maybe some of our audiences, but I've heard the words PCI. I don't know what a DSS is. I've heard
oh
NIST, but what are these? What is this
yeah. So
853,
there's
856 stuff?
Yeah, so there's the PCI DSS, which is the payment card issuers. That's for your credit card processing. Um, they say that okay, you need 7 characters minimum. But then whenever you go over to one of the NIST publications, NIST 853, um, in it, if you read through it, there's this pages and pages and pages, and then there's the one thing that says, okay, passwords minimum 8 characters. But then you can go right on to another NIST publication, and it doesn't tell you what you should do as a minimum. It says evaluate the environment, and based on the environment, make your decision. And for ISO 27001, 2701, they're the same way. They don't say that there's a minimum. They say evaluate and choose. Um, So, and as somebody said, 14 plus characters with no complexity is better than 8 characters with complexity because, well, yeah, an 8 character password, it doesn't matter if it's alphanumerics, special characters, it's a very limited set of possibilities. It's possible to brute force. It is going to be easier to brute force that than a 14 character, just because as you add more characters, it takes longer to brute force through that. I actually, I go beyond that to say, no, I do passphrases now. So
Yeah,
this is
is
the
that this complexity bit of this comment here?
right. So the complexity is that, it doesn't matter if your password is a ampersand caret MN924 capital L. That's just as easy for a computer to guess or brute force as an 8 letter password that's just AMCFNB1. For the computers, it makes no difference. Both of them are equally easy to brute force. But you make it longer, it makes it harder and harder and harder to brute force. That said, brute force password hacking is not as prevalent as it used to be because attackers could get away with that back in the day because they could just throw it at the account until they got through. But we've gotten smarter, defenders have gotten wiser. Oh, you failed more than 10 times, your account's on lockdown. You can't keep, just beating it down. So that's one part of it. And then also, I've made the switch over to I don't even go for complexity, as in special characters and everything. I'm more interested. My go to is if I'm not using a password manager, I'm going to go for long, unique passphrases. So, like
Give us an example.
long faced horse on the prairie.
There you go.
I mean, a lot of people say, but those are dictionary words. And yeah, yes, but it's still a very, very, very long password that is easy and convenient for me to memorize. And that is going to be much more secure for me than the 8 or 14 character password.
Sure.
So that's kind of like a I'm not using a password manager. I'm not going to keep it stored anywhere. I'm just going to keep it in my head and I need to recall it. I will go to those long passphrase type keywords where it's just, a string of words that I'm going to remember. And if you've ever, and if you've looked at a lot of new um, security measures that are baked into certain security software, where they have okay, you have to negotiate a back and forth for authentication, authorization, for whatever. They're starting to move to those. All right, here's these distinct individual words that form up a passphrase, and you have to feed those back into the system because again, the length is going to be more important than having a short, complex one.
Totally. Yeah, and I'm a big fan. Lewis, have you seen this Diceware thing?
Diceware,
We've,
which random
yeah,
generating passwords.
right. Yeah, you probably know far more about it than me, but it's basically like this long word list. I don't know how many words are in it. And the idea is that you can make a password with just like a dice roll. So you roll like a die, you get a 4, and then you roll it again, you get a 3, and you go on, you get like 6 numbers, and then like that 6 number sequence will be the first word in your passphrase. Um, I don't
Right.
know who made this up, but it's similar idea of
Yeah,
a way to
it
make a
is. It's just
password.
it's a programmatic way of you know coming up with whatever that ridiculous long password is going to end up being.
Yeah, and
Um,
I wish I were like big brain enough to understand the math and stuff behind it, but there's a site that'll generate them. I just did one that's it's 4 dice rolls. So it made a passphrase of rifling, cilantro, strive, balancing. I don't use this for anything, so I'm going to say it out loud. But it says number of passwords possible is 3 quadrillion. That just like boggles the brain for me.
Right,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
understand that.
and this is great, and this is also one of those this is one of those good skills that you can pass on and teach to end users because they are inclined to, yeah, do stuff like that, or they're inclined to, they're going to reuse passwords. They're going to reuse they're going to use a password in multiple locations, and then whenever they're forced to change it, they're going to change the last letter, they're going to change, something. So strength is questionable. But if you teach them this little trick, it actually makes it easier for them to make a longer, more secure password for themselves without having to go through those, my job summer 2023. And then whenever they have to change it, fall 2023. Um,
Totally. And we've got a question here.
mhm.
This is interesting. Does brute force password hacking work only on English word passwords?
Nope, because all they have to do is change their dictionary. I
Yeah.
mean,
So
that's the
new
short
word
answer.
list or
Yeah,
yeah.
they just use a different dictionary of of possible words and or phrases. Um, is now that would have to be a conscious decision on whoever's trying to do the brute forcing. They would either have to have, be already using a dictionary that includes those words, or they would have to say, all right, do X number of permutations with the English dictionary, then do X number of permutations with the Spanish dictionary, and then, X number,
That's a lot
putting
of
them
work
both together. Yeah.
for sure. So a follow-up question, I think from the same user. When you say dictionary, is it like the literal normal dictionary? Like one on my shelf back here?
I mean, kind of. It's just it's okay, not really a dictionary. It's more like just a CSV file with here's all the words that exist in the language.
Rockyou.txt.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
there are people that say that somewhere you can get word list or what is Rockyou's like a password list, I think, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
those are, I mean, and those are, and that's another type of ditch. Well, you've got a ditch. There's dictionaries that they use that are literally just the language of, all right, here's all the words that we know of that exist in English. Then there are password dictionaries that are just, okay, here's a bunch of already known passwords based on what's been leaked before, what's come out of compromises or hacks. Those are all in there. All of the common permutations of, 11112 11113. Those are all kind of in there already for you.
Love it. Yeah.
Um,
I wanted to pop this question up from Aaron Hard, or maybe just statement. Also, the nice thing about using random dictionary words and a long passphrase is there are around 170,000 possible words to choose from. High entropy. Short alphanumeric passwords only have 46 possible characters to choose from. So lower entropy. Yeah, awesome point.
it's exactly. It's like, so back to the dictionary. And this is a bad analogy, but the story you can tell with 46 words is not going to be as robust and as interesting as the story you can tell with 170,000 words. Um,
Yeah,
you can do more with them. There's more permutations, and you can't guess where it's going to go.
well put. Joshua McDaniel says, loving the stream. How do password managers work and are they secure? LastPass just got pwned. I think it's all a terrible
Ah,
idea.
yes, I was hoping
I
somebody
feel
would
like
ask
this is a
this, and I wouldn't have to
contention
bring it
point.
up.
Let's go.
All right, so before we talk about that directly, let's talk about all right, so that password you got underneath your keyboard there. Yep. What are you going to have to do when somebody finds that out?
I'm I'm gonna have to change it, right?
Right.
I mean, if I'm a
What?
smart end user, but I have to know they found it too.
Right. Yeah. So, same deal. What if you didn't keep it there? Maybe you kept it in a spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah,
What do you
or
have
on
to
my
do?
desktop.
Yeah. What do you have to do when you find out that password's been compromised through, you see the login that you didn't make, or you get an alert from a dark web monitoring service. What do you have to do?
I'm
Change
gonna
your
rush and change
passwords.
it. Yeah.
And so the same thing happens with a password manager, like with LastPass. Yes, they had their scenario that what went down with them. Well, you still got to do the same thing. You have to go change all your passwords. Granted, it is a larger pool of your passwords in one location, but if you're managing your passwords in some way, shape, or form anyway, where they are recorded somewhere, you still have to have that incident response plan of, oh, those have been compromised. I have to rotate them. So whether you're keeping those passwords written down, whether they're in a spreadsheet, whether they're in a locally stored vault, that the encrypted vault you've got, or a cloud-based like a Passportal, our solution, you still have to be prepared that one day, somewhere, some reason, you may have to rotate your passwords because they're potentially compromised. So that statement out there and out of the way, it does mean you're going to have to change a lot of passwords really fast. Well, not necessarily really fast, but you're going to have a lot of passwords you're going to have to rotate. But I kind of internalize that is a cost. That is just the nature of the beast. Something can happen in many, many, many different ways that might force me to have to rotate my passwords. I just have to accept that. That's kind of just one of those, you just accept it. It might happen. Okay, so how
Yeah.
do I make my life easier then for whenever that does happen? And
Yeah. Fair enough.
having, yeah, and having a dark web monitoring for password compromises. That's one way of alerting you that you need to do it. Monitoring for if you don't have conditional access enabled in your platforms. Go and do a quick audit every once in a while and check those IP logins and make sure that they're coming from known good locations. And if you're seeing logins coming in from on certain user accounts from unknown locations, well, go trip that account in the domain or in the identity management platform you have for reset password, make them log in again. What's the next? Oh, we got a new
Yeah,
question.
this is the follow-up from Joshua. He said, "Good point, but my argument to that is 1 password equals all your stuff pwned in the instance of LastPass, whereas it's easier, in my opinion, to change 1 password that's been hacked on a single site or service."
Exactly. So, well, here's the thing with LastPass. They got the vaults. They don't have any meaningful access to the information that is in there yet. They're going to have to, throw some
Yeah, do some
quantum
work.
decryption at it or something else. They got a lot of work ahead of them to make any meaningful use of what was stolen there. But that is a good point. Is you've got that 1 password is compromised in that one platform. Well, that's still the same thing with a password manager, in that if you're using the password manager and one of your passwords that's in your password manager for a platform is compromised, well, you still only need to change it for that platform. Now, whenever they do compromise your, how they compromise that locally, that 1 password, your master password, yeah, that is I now have to go rotate all of these passwords and everything. But that scenario is the extreme scenario. That is, the extreme of what we saw with LastPass.
Yeah,
But even with the LastPass, it wasn't I've got to stay up for the next 24 hours and rotate all of these passwords. It's okay, let me make some coffee. I'm going to have to work through this over the next day or two.
yeah,
And
totally makes.
and for me, that's one of those, you have to be prepared to do that anyway, no matter how you're maintaining your passwords. It's just, scale is definitely a question there, but it's still that it could happen. Therefore, you need to understand it and be prepared for
Yeah. Lewis, I want to talk about more best practices here in a moment,
it.
but I think it's interesting something you said about So in the case of the LastPass breach, they got access to the vault, but they're not today able to crack those passwords, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I,
So
I was watching YouTube the other week, as one does. I saw this video about this quantum apocalypse thing. Have you heard about this?
oh,
uh,
well, they've the quantum, that
let me yeah let me
singularity, the
well, maybe that, but let me add, specifically the video I saw was, I think, kind of related to this, but it was the idea that data could be stored now that maybe later will have power to crack, which
yes.
I imagine, yeah, could be applicable with this LastPass stuff. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. Is this just like crazy alarmist stuff, or are we gonna have like quantum computers in our basement cracking,
Well,
terabytes of data?
well, depending on which rumor
Curveball.
rock, depending on which rumor rock you kick over, it's like, no, well, hey, we're already doing that ourselves out in the desert. You know, remember that big, data processing facility we built
Yeah,
5, 6 years ago that doesn't do anything? But no, it is one of those things of, yes, there are definitely threat actors out there, nation states, APT groups, that is what they do. They just they're they grab what they can, take what they can, however they can, and if it is useful in the moment, great, it's useful in the moment. But they're still going to hold on to it. They're still going to warehouse it uh, for the encrypted stuff, for the things that are have proper protections on it. They're still going to it's perfectly viable for them to hold on to that in cold storage somewhere, and whenever they have a new capability for either what the like you said, the quantum decryption capability, the abilities of quantum computers to be able to do decryptions at ridiculously fast speeds. So we're going from the regular computers doing it in 1,000 years to quantum computers doing it in seconds, minutes. And when do we get to that capability is the
yeah,
question.
yeah.
Uh, just leaning on my proper training is electrical engineering and computer engineering, and just off of that, I'm like, yeah, no, we ain't nowhere near that. Like in like the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, I don't think so. Now, hey,
Sure.
somebody out there might surprise me with it, but
Yeah,
I
maybe
don't
10
think
or 20. I don't know. That
it's
it's a
not an
curveball question, right?
immediate concern.
Lewis, when are we gonna get AGI? Um, that's all right. Let's
uh,
keep rolling, because we have
yeah,
a couple other questions that are pretty interesting. I'm gonna take this one because it's a good segue. Rayan, I think it is, says, if an AI model is trained using database of known password breaches, would you think it would be able to guess the password of a user based on their username, pattern of passwords,
yeah. I
etc.?
mean,
I say totally.
you're just replacing the correlation that a live threat actor would have done. The threat actor is going to, threat actor is like, okay, I've got a username and a password out of a breach. Well, let me go see where that username or that email address is used on all these other platforms, and let me try that password there. I mean, so threat actors today already do that. Letting an AI do that, oh yeah, that's simple, easy. Somebody's probably already got it. And at this point, I wouldn't even consider it AI at this point. It's just it's algorithm, it's machine learning. But
Sure.
it still automates the process. So what used to take somebody time and effort hasn't, they've commoditized it. They've brought it down into a one-click function, which means they can do it faster, and also it can be distributed and they can do it faster. That's this if somebody does start doing that, and I actually am probably pretty sure somebody is already
That's
doing that somewhere.
happening now. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be one of those things of, it'll be a tool that's out there eventually. That's
Yeah.
just kind of like we have ransomware as a service now platforms. This will
Yeah.
kind of just occupy that same space as, oh, hey, script kiddie that wants to get into cybercrime. Here's the tools.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't want to, you know, brainstorm too much on how something like this works, but I think how I interpret this question is like looking at one of these large language models like, ChatGPT, which everybody's of course familiar with. Yeah, feed it. What if one were to feed a large language model, tons of tokens of like a rockyou.txt, and rather than look for like maybe permutations of passwords like a brute force, what if instead it could like think about
It's
human
more selective
psychology?
about it. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
okay, I
like
know this about this particular
I know
user.
you're going to use your dog or your like
Right, right. Yeah,
grandma or whatever.
yeah. That could
It's
that would be
scary.
that would be the power of it. That would be taking advantage of a language model to try and power that.
Yeah. Although,
And
yeah, I guess that's only language model. There's, of course, other machine learning models that might
right,
attack
right.
this problem in a
But
different way.
you would still get the same, you would still get the end result of possibly shortening the time it takes to brute force. And also, oh yeah, yeah, AI powered social engineering.
AI,
That's
yeah,
where it's
that's
dangerous. That's whenever you start pairing the two together.
yeah,
Um,
that's I 100%, 1000% believe this is happening now with like the leak of the llama language model. Like
yeah,
this stuff is going to be as simple as running on your laptop, like literally.
it is, and this is going to, and this is where, you know, this is where I think the actual threat and headache is going to happen the soonest. Is
It's the
taking
people
advantage,
layer.
yeah, is leveraging the social engineering along with the letting the AI have a shot at the, using the past brute forcing, but just being able to milk the end users for the information outright. I mean, people are like, oh, cool, I can ask Chat GPT to write a script for me. Well, yeah, how about you just, hey, Chat GPT, make me a website, make me a fake website. And they can just copy paste splash it in. I mean, they've got better ways of doing it probably, but it's where they can start using it to say, okay, let's automate this process even more. So instead of being able to send out a campaign to 80,000, 100,000, well, not even that much, instead of sending out 1,000 targeted emails where they form filled useful information about the targets in there, it's like, no, let's do 80,000, 90,000, 150,000 in bulk via using tools like Chat GPT or something, and letting it. It's the exponential scale of it is the problem,
Sure.
because the bad actor only a bad actor or team of bad actors only has so much time and resources.
Yeah.
When
So
you
rather
give them
than
a tool that makes them more efficient,
Yeah, especially if you added like this this conversation will probably get us put on a list for creating some kind of new ransom tool. But yeah, I mean that we're going totally side quest, but I love it. Imagine you have some database of leaked user details, but it also includes demographic data, like what media they consume and like where they live geographically. All these different things
oh,
you could feed.
those profiles
Yeah,
already exist.
yeah, for sure. So feed that into whatever large language model.
Well, I mean,
Say,
and
write a convincing email to get somebody to click this.
if you
It's
want to get into the, I mean, that is exactly what, I'm pulling from the past here, but no, that is exactly what Cambridge Analytica's whole deal was, building those profiles. Believe
yeah,
me, those profiles exist. There's the private ones that the big guys hold on us, but there's also the profiles that, threat actors and dark web
small
groups
research
are,
institutes and
yeah, and
their
security
research.
researchers. Yeah,
Yeah,
they've got those profiles too built out, and I do not doubt the ability to feed those profiles in and have it spit out some very concerning uh, phishing and social engineering attacks.
yeah. I mean, if you have a couple $1 million and some PhDs, it's scary. um, cool. Maybe we'll get off AI for a moment.
But
Another
I mean,
question.
it
Yeah.
is the buzzword of the day.
It is, yeah, and we've been doing these streams for a while. It's only been like this year that I've seen, this rise in interest. But we'll move on for a moment. Maybe we'll come back to AI. Solent drone shows, which is interesting in itself. Maybe I need to check these guys out. What are your guys' opinions on biometric security? If that gets stolen, you can't change it, right? I think it's a dumb idea. Passwords have no personal correlation. bio data stolen equals wrecked for life?
Well, it depends on what kind of biometric data and what's doing it. So, like me, I personally have no concerns whatsoever about using the fingerprint scanner on my computer because it's going to keep the hashed recognition of my fingerprint locally there. That's not going anywhere. And if somebody stole that recognition, good luck. You don't have the TPM. I'm not sure if it's still handled by the TPM. It's probably another secure enclave chip.
T2 chip or something?
Yeah. So it's so that I don't have to. Whenever it's I don't want to say cheap, but a cheap biometric access control where it's storing your retina scan somewhere in a database that it's yeah, sure. That makes me feel a little uneasy in that call because that would be they could steal the database and then they would have access to that information. So I don't think so. Biometrics are great. They're wonderful. They have their purpose. They have their time, but it's how they are implemented is more important than anything else. So fingerprints. I am. I appreciate like Microsoft Hello, Windows Hello. That's the biometric for your face to unlock your computer based on your face linked into your domain. That's still going to be handled locally on you know your computer for that part. So I don't feel so bad about those. But whenever we do get to like access control systems where they have the handprint scans or the retina scans or things, yeah, make me a little uneasy, but it's still probably better than the alternatives in those situations.
Yeah.
Personally, I prefer even though there is the opportunity for losing control over them, I tend to favor physical security tokens like FIDO keys, YubiKey, um, things of that nature, or RFID cards. RFID cards, not so much because they're easy to spoof, but yeah, exactly. For anybody that doesn't know what that is, that was a flipper, and it is trivial to clone somebody's RFID badge or card with one of those.
Yeah,
Um,
mine's dead at the moment, but
yeah,
um,
so
yeah,
and that's why I kind of prefer the UB keys and that style of security token now.
yeah. Lewis, this is a dumb question. Are retina scanners a thing? I thought this was only in like James Bond movies. Have you
Oh no
seen
no
these
no
in
no!
production?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
will you can get a retina scanner access control system where you don't match, it doesn't unlock. Um,
Yeah.
they're not widespread. They're not often used. I don't believe they are not any more effective at the they might be a little bit better at the false positive recognition, but it's probably not much more than like fingerprints or other biometrics. One of the worst biometrics is actually hands. Of all things, if you've ever
Why?
seen the biometric ones, um, it depends on which ones you're using. The old ones, um, yeah, and iris scans. Yes, that is the evolution. It used to be retina scans. Now it's iris scans. Is like the next step up because your iris is easier to image and easier to get good quality. It's a good quality data set compared to your retina.
I don't even know if I know the difference. That is the iris, like the side
So
outside of
the
the
iris is
pupil.
the color part of your
Okay.
eye on the outside. That's going to be unique for everybody. That is just as unique as probably more unique than fingerprints are.
Yeah.
Retina
The
is
redness is like
back of the
back in
eyeball.
there, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
and
Okay.
that's I don't want to say it's legacy because it's still around. Some places it's still in use, but iris scans are the replacement for that.
Interesting. Had no idea. This is like biology 101 for me. Well,
um,
cool.
but I mean, if you have your choice, iris scans are probably going to be one of the best whenever it comes to not having false positives for authorization. You're probably never going to see people fooling an iris scanner the way that they fool face based biometric uh, authentication.
For sure. Well, cool. Lewis, I do want to go back to our conversation a little bit because we took a huge side quest, but I always like taking side quests. They're a lot of fun. Um,
Mhm.
about breaking best practices. So we talked about, passphrases being pretty damn secure. But what are some of those, maybe best practices that are worth taking a second consideration about?
So I think the biggest one is that with the update to some of the NIST standards a little while ago, they said, okay, you're not supposed to rotate passwords anymore. And it was like, for me, that was like, on the hell wouldn't I rotate passwords? But it makes sense. The argument that they're making is that if you force normal end users to rotate their passwords every 60 days, they're going to continue to use poor passwords. And it's going to probably even exacerbate the problem by having them reuse passwords in multiple locations.
Yeah,
So
I
they're
haven't
like,
heard of this. So
yeah,
you're saying NIST updated their standard to say to not rotate passwords?
yep, yeah. It's buried in there somewhere in 853. They made the recommendation that okay, you're not supposed to rotate passwords.
Like, at
But
all? Because I've
yeah,
been at many orgs where it's, like, 90 days or a year or so they're saying what? Just, like, choose a password once and, like, that's the password you get?
well, the in this specific argument, what they're saying is that if you force end users to rotate the password, humans are fallible. They're going to take
Ah,
shortcuts. They're going to reuse the password. They're going to
the
add the
user
one
will
to the end of
reset.
it. They're going to add the
Yeah, they'll
two.
add 1 or question mark. I
And they're
see.
going to do that same thing across all of their logins everywhere, and it's all going to be super similar.
So
You
it's not
and
it's maybe have give them a random password or passphrase, like, still do it, but don't let them do it. Is that it? And we had a comment here too, password rotation is archaic.
yeah, and that's what it is. Is the reasoning there is if you force them to rotate. I mean, if the password's not compromised, and then you force them to rotate, they're not going to put in a more secure password. They're actually probably going to hurt themselves by using the same password there that they just set up for their bank account because they can now remember those. And then whenever they got, you know, done, they have to redo it. One year
Okay,
password.
I see. Yeah, just throwing some comments up here from Ben Rowland. My org uses 1-year passwords and forces 2FA for remote and minimum 14 character.
Yeah.
But
And
but I do want to go back. So we're talking about breaking best practices. Is that NIST practice a good one? Should we follow it or no?
so that's one for me where, okay, that's like the baseline of, okay, since, and going with their reasoning that they actually state in there, end users aren't smart, they will do dumb things. They say you shouldn't do it because it's just going to encourage them to do even worse passwords and have worse password hygiene for themselves. So that's why their guidance there is don't force the passwords. My view on it and the breaking away from that defined best practice they have laid out there is, well, think about it in the sense of as technicians. Okay, for the end users, that makes sense. But, well, why not help them not do the bad behavior? If you give them a password manager that can auto generate the randomized passwords for them of the required length and complexity, then you're negating why they tell you that you shouldn't rotate passwords. So that's one
I
part of
see.
it.
I see.
And then for you as technicians, we share passwords. We have to share passwords. It's common accounts, common equipment. Everybody, sometimes the managed switch does not support LDAP or whatever, and you have to share that. It's going to happen. Um, we have access to a lot of privileged accounts with passwords, and not rotating those passwords to me feels like setting yourself up for failure. Because again, if you're using a password manager solution and you're using a password manager solution that lets you share that password and even the MFA amongst multiple techs, um, take advantage of it. But at the same time, you're adding in a capability because, well, like with Passportal, one of the things we're able to do is there are workflows in there that allows you to say, all right, once this password has been viewed by two different people, it rotates. And then whenever the next user comes in, they see the new rotated password, and Passportal has reached out to that service account on Azure or on domain and rotated that credential for them. Because what is one of the things that the more people that know a password, it's just the statistics. The more people know the password, the more likely that password is to leak. It is to be compromised. So as soon as that second person sees it, rotate it. Or maybe it's on usage. This password has been accessed 5 times. Rotate it and let the automation take care of it for you.
Yeah, love it. And of course, there is Passportal we mentioned, which I'm assuming does all these things. But I do want to get to Ben Rowland's question here. With an organization with over 1,700 users, what's the best practice for that with minimum confusion and
Fusion and
service
service calls.
calls?
So with minimum service calls, it's you set them up for a self-service. So you you make that decision on, all right, are we going to give them a password manager? Are we giving in-use password managers? If we're giving them a password manager, then yeah, let's set them up so they do 90-day rotations. And it can be an automated thing, and it can make it easier for them. But on the service call side of it, it's like, well, they need a self-service option. Whenever they're locked out, whenever they type in their password wrong and they get the account lockout, instead of them putting in a support ticket, with Passportal, it's just one solution, but multiple ways to attack it. With Passportal, you've got the ability to give them an app on their phone so they can reset their account login and the password right then and there. So it's called Blink. They'll open up Blink. Yes, I forgot. They push the button. It cycles through. It makes the connection back to your Azure, to your domain, negotiates with it, and then it spits back out to them. All right, here's your new password. Go use this. And then whenever they go use it, it's that temporary password and they have to reset that new password again. So that's one way of, okay, we're going to increase the security, our stance here. We're going to be a little bit more aggressive, but we're going to give you an easy way to do the password reset so you don't have to put in a help desk ticket and wait for us. That's a way of addressing it. And the other way of addressing it is, well, you minimize it by not allowing the problems to occur. And that's whenever you fall back to the NIST best practices is, all right, you're going to set up the password. You're not going to force them to rotate it, but you need to make up for the fact that you're not forcing them to rotate by having conditional access set up, using MFA, using a dark web monitoring service for compromised accounts. So
Awesome.
it's
Yeah, I'm just
it's back into that risk evaluation. If it's 1,700 end users that are all working retail and it's just for their point of sale login, and they're all regular admin users, okay, yeah, sure, they're not going to have to rotate passwords and everything. But if it's highly confidential information that they're managing, it's medical, it's financial, you have to be more aggressive, and you have to expect the organization to accept and understand that you need to be this aggressive, and that it is going to cause friction and frustration, and people have to live with it. It's like with multi-factor authentication now. I still, have conversations sometimes with past. I still hear conversations here and there where people will just say, "Hey, we don't want to use MFA. And it's like, you can't
But why?
not. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you
You
can't
need
not
to
use
know.
MFA. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because, okay, all right, someone gets your email and your password, they're in. What's stopping them at this point? It's like, those two things can be guessed. So
Yeah.
MFA is one of those. If you're using MFA, yeah, it could be SMS. That's not the best. But if it's an
Why is
authentication,
SMS not the best?
because it's easy to intercept.
How could that
That
happen?
I can go pretend I'm somebody else. Go to the Verizon store and have them issue me a SIM for a phone number that's not mine, or slide
But
them
the
a tweet.
employee would just do that?
Oh, of course.
They're on my side.
Yeah, no. I'm what? How many? I mean, not to pick on anybody in specific, but how many times
T-Mobile.
has it been T-Mobile or Verizon has been involved in SIM swap scams?
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's regular person off the street gets a job at a franchise T-Mobile or franchise Verizon store. They now have access to reset SIMs all day long. They can do it. That's part of the function of the job. And if they're not up to snuff, if they're willing to take a little money on the side,
Sure. Yeah.
an actual threat actor can come in and say, "Hey, here are the phone numbers I need these SIMs for," and they'll just pass them off for $20, $40, $100, and then
Yeah. So
there you go. You now have somebody intercepting your SMS messages.
so
And
SMS not the best. What instead?
so, authentication apps for your phone are good. It's a lot better than SMS is. Physical FIDO tokens and biometrics are better. Those
Yeah.
are the best options you got.
Yeah. Ray in our chat mentioned how's passkeys the future of passwords. I think he means like a physical token, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
If he's talking about passkeys, physical tokens, yes, they are wonderful. Love them to death. They're nigh impossible to crack, compromise, duplicate. Somebody
This
needs
is like
physical
your UB
access.
key and
Yeah, UB keys and or FIDO keys.
okay.
FIDO is the standard. UB key is the brand.
I see. Yeah, my knowledge ended. That's why I was like, well, UB key and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure there's
yeah.
others. Yeah, I'm not
But
well
yeah, I
informed.
mean, you can buy a FIDO token. You can buy a USB key that is on the FIDO standard and use that as a pass key.
Beautiful.
But yeah,
I'm
no,
jumping
that's
around a lot, but
it. Yeah, we have, but that's definitely going to be more common, more prevalent. But then there's also the passwordless future that has been tried to be sold to us by Microsoft and some other big players out there.
yeah. So this
And
is like email as your password, or what is
so it's
passwordless
like
in this
no,
case?
so it's like I'm going to log in, and then it sends that the like with Google. Google does a really good job of this. You try to log
Yeah.
in, and then Google sends you the push notification to your phone. Is this you, or are you trying to log in? And you have to then push OK on your phone. That can be exploited because you can notification bomb somebody. If you're not and if you're not
What's that?
familiar with so notification bomb, there's another term for it that sounds a lot cooler than that. But what it is just a threat actor goes to a website, tries to log in, and then it pushes a push notification to that person's phone. And it says, "Are you trying to log in?" No. And then the attacker does it again. And then the user says no. And then the attacker does it again. And they say no.
Just
And they keep
flood
that
it.
up until 5 o'clock in the morning. And their
Mm,
phone never stops buzzing because it's saying, do you want to log in? 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 Eventually the end user is going to get frustrated. I want to go to sleep. Yes. And then
wow.
they have access.
I had no idea that was a thing. Quick side quest. I remember we had a friend in high school. We would text him all at once, like tons of people, and his phone was where like it would intercept. I don't know. It broke the phone. It was like one of those crappy OSs. So that's interesting. Notification bomb. I do think we should wrap up soon here, but I
Yeah.
want to take a couple other questions and then give a chance to talk about Passportal just briefly at the end here. But Joshua wants to know, what are some common vulnerabilities in password hashing algorithms? How can organizations ensure that they are using a secure hashing algorithm for password
For
storage?
storage. So that is always going to be, well, okay, are we talking about Windows or are we talking about homebrewed, well, not homebrewed, but custom apps, custom databases, stuff like that? Um, I mean, there's always the standard stuff. Make sure it's salted. Choose, a higher end encryption. And it's and whenever you get into this part of it, it's not so much what is the most secure. It starts to be a business conversation of, all right, how many clicks is how many ticks is this going to take? This algorithm, if we're going to use this and this process to handle the salting of the passwords and the encryption and everything, how intensive is that? Because there's really intensive ways of doing it, but if you're on Azure or AWS trying to do that, it's going to run up your bill. It's going to make it's going to increase your hosting costs, especially if you're doing some in outs somehow somewhere for that process. But there's also so you can sometimes run into that business of, well, okay, the business challenge of, we don't want to spend that much money on it, or we don't want it to beat up the infrastructure that much, so we're going to take a step down. We're going to go to 256 instead of a 512 for bit length on one of the
Sure,
hash
trade
tables.
off on
Right. Yeah.
resources.
You have to make that trade-off evaluation. But and as far as the vulnerabilities go, you can't, I don't want to say you can't keep up, but the only way you keep up is by going to whoever manages whatever that algorithm is, whatever that protocol is. Keep up with them, see what they're saying, see what other people are saying about them. Because one of my things I always say is, vulnerabilities exist in anything and all things all the time. And as soon as somebody thinks as soon as you found one and you fix it, there's another one. There will always be
Absolutely.
more. There will always be a vulnerability out there for somebody to discover. So, and that gets back in, you have to make your risk evaluations and build your risk profiles and decide what is allowable or what is not allowable. And from the technician side, it's, yeah, sure, no, we're going to do the best, but the business is saying, no, we can't afford the best. Back it down a little bit.
Trade-offs and everything.
Yeah.
Love it. Let's rapid fire two more here and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Ben Roland says physical tokens and MFA are great, but that all goes out the window when you don't have app blocker blocking rogue exe or source files that grab session tokens, like what happened with Linus Tech Tips channel.
Yep.
Any thoughts
Yeah, and I
there?
mean that's the man. I mean, that is a I mean, it's a really advanced man in the middle, but it's a man in the middle attack. They have sniffed your credentials. It's not much different than uh well, it is different, but it's the same concept as like golden salmon ticket attacks or Kerberos based attacks in an environment. The Outlook vulnerability that was patched this month with the NTML hashing password. That's one of those things of, all an attacker had to do was send an email with one of the properties set via UNC path, and it would dump out the user's hashed password to that UNC path for you. Yep, that's the one.
I just dropped a link there.
Yeah,
I
and
hadn't heard about that.
that's a great example of that type of, I don't it's not really a man in the middle, because it's somebody in the environment that was able to that can take advantage of that vulnerability. But they these types of attacks exist everywhere. And yes, physical tokens and MFA, yes, they are great, but they can be defeated. That's why you still have to, no matter what you do, no matter what you choose, no matter what you implement, you have to back it up, going forward. it has to start being backed up by conditional access controls. It has to be backed up by good auditing, by conditional access, and everything that goes with it. So it is security in depth. You cannot throw one solution. You cannot implement a single point solution and expect it to take care of everything. You have to put multiple layers of defense in place, because you give an attacker just one barricade to get over or through, that's where all their effort and time is going to go to, and they will get past it. You have to
Love
put
it.
multiple barricades in the way to make it as painful and as long and as not worth their while as you possibly can.
I need that like on a quote on my wall. Um, well, I think we're nearly wrapping up here, but Lewis, I know you guys don't pitch much. The Inable, I try and get you to pitch, but I think we should just a little bit. I keep hearing about this pass portal thing. I don't know what it is. It does like passwords or something.
Yes,
Can
it
you can
is
you talk about
our
that?
yeah, it is our password management and document management platform. It gives you a lot of great capabilities. One of the nicer things, it gives you the ability to do a branded password manager that you can resell to your end users at a really good price. But it also has some capabilities in it for things like the workflows. You can tell the system that whenever a password has been used X number of times, that password should be flagged, or that password should be automatically rotated if you have a Passportal integrated with your domain or your Azure instance. So you can automate a lot of those um, password practices that are good, that make you more resilient, that makes it harder for attackers. Because I mean, hey, you've got an attacker who's in your environment, and they've set themselves up a little bit of persistence, and then the passwords they're using have rotated. They've got to start back over again, and you never even knew they were there in the first place. Now, is that kind of a shotgun approach of hoping that maybe you'll catch somebody? I mean, yes, but sometimes you just never will know that somebody has set up persistence in your environment and they're using a set of compromised credentials. Make it harder for them. Rotate those privileged rotate those privileged accounts. And our Passportal product makes that really, really easy for you. You can also do SSL certs and domain monitoring. So if your SSL certificates or your domain expiration is coming up, you can get warnings for that. You can get email alerts generated off of it. And it's also a really neat, it has a tertiary, um, some passwords managers have this, some don't. It has a tertiary token. That is something you said. It's called
The
my
TT,
brain.
I've never heard this term, tertiary token.
It's
Like
it's
a
just like it's a third part of your MFA. So 2FA, and no, you have 2FA, and then they start, no, you should call it MFA because
3FA.
multi-factor.
Oh,
Yeah,
multi. Okay, I
yeah,
see.
and then this is like, so what you're getting is you're going to have your password, you're going to have your user account to log in, then you're going to have your organization token. The organization token is something, it acts as the seed for the encryption of all your data that's in there, but it can't be reset. It cannot be requested to be sent. It is, it, and you have to tell the other people that need access to it what it is. So it's meant to be an out of bounds communication that nobody can find it or discover it unless you actually just flat out tell them what it is. That way, if somebody does compromise your email accounts, or they're able to, successfully bypass the MFA that's there, they still need to know what that organization token is in order to get into the data. And if they found a way to get around needing the organization key to get in and look at the data, well, the data is not going to make any sense because you need the organization key, which acts as the seed for the encryption of the data to make sense of it. So it's a little bit of extra. So it's the same protections that we have in place that that prevented whenever the LastPass vaults were stolen, prevented users from just going in, the attackers from just seeing it and making use of it. We have the same, it's not the same, but we have that other barrier in the way that means if anybody gets it, it's useless.
Additional layer.
Right.
Love it.
And then there's documentation management in it. It's a really good documentation manager. You can share links out with it. There's a good API for it. A lot of good automation and workflows with it. Integrates into a lot of different PSAs. Integrates into our own take control as well. So if you're running a take control session, you can directly access your stored passwords from inside of the take control session. So anybody out there that's using our take control product.
I don't know if I don't want to side quest again. I don't know if I know what tape control is, but
Take control is our remote desktop.
Okay.
Solution.
Fantastic.
It's we have a standalone version of it that lets you do ad hoc and agent based support.
Okay.
And also it's integrated natively inside of Insight RMM and N-Central.
Beautiful. Okay, Lewis, you are a wealth of information. This is always extremely fun. I feel like we could go deep on any of these topics. I loved our side quest into AI. I think we should pick one and have a pointed
We may have
I
to
don't know,
do
just
an
like
AI specific.
AI kills us all discussion.
Oh yeah. What should we actually be worried about with AI and kind of our day-to-day responsibilities as sysadmins, technicians, and help desk.
Yes, I'm going to write this down because I think we could we could think of some scary situations. But we are coming up on just over an hour here. If this is your first time, or maybe you've dropped by these sessions a lot, please check out Passportal. We have a link down there, inable.com/product/passportal/trial. If you're looking for a password management solution. If you want to get notifications on when we do these live streams, please go to thisisAnITsupportgroup.com. Sign up. We'll send you a ping every time we do these. Thinking about doing one in a week, like a resume roast. It's been a long time. So anyway, I think we'll close it up. Any closing thoughts from head security nerd Lewis Pope before we sign off today?
Have fun. Don't stress out too much about it all. Computers will only do what you tell them to do. So if something goes wrong, it probably wasn't the computer.
Amazing. Off the dome. All right. Well, that's it. We're gonna hit end. We'll see.